Hello and welcome to the second part of my series of videos about landscape terrain tools, or LTT for short. In this video we'll be doing foliage, which is planting trees and grass, and we will be doing object placement. So let's get straight into it. Go to landscape terrain tools, foliage. When you go onto the foliage, this is what you will see. We'll first plant some trees. You have various options here. You have the tree object, which is the tree you'll be planting. In my case, I will plant some palm trees to start with. You've got the density. 1 is very tightly packed, 0 is none at all. So I shall put this around here. Start and end is like the textures, so I'm going to put it around here, so it's only planted in this height range. And you also have some steepness settings. You've got the place trees on hills, so you can either untick it, and trees will be planted anywhere regardless of the steepness, or you can untick it and you can specifically adjust the maximum steepness of the terrain you want the trees to be planted on. Often you want this to be somewhere near this value where the cliff texture was, because I don't want my trees to be planted on this rock texture. So I'm going to set it to about 0.4, and then if I click plant trees like so, we can see that the trees are not planted on this rocky texture and they're planted in my height range. I'm going to quickly adjust some of these settings just so the trees look okay. So that looks pretty good. And you can also add as many trees as you want. In my case, I will be adding 5 different trees. I'm going to be adding some bushes as well, which are just trees, but they're bush models, so they're a bit lower down, they're less high. So you have a range of heights there. I'm going to be editing some of these densities. Normally I would have my bushes at a higher density. Now if I click plant trees, you can see we have a wide range of foliage here, and that looks pretty good. That looks quite realistic. We have this drop down here. Basically, if we click on the terrain and we go to the place trees setting, we can see we have these trees here. These are all the trees which could be possibly planted on the terrain. If we choose the first option, it will delete any of these which are unused. Second option would keep any unused ones, which is useful if you want to manually plant some trees yourself. And the third option would, as well as keeping any unused, it would also plant over all the trees you have on here at the moment. The first 2 options delete all the trees and plant anew, whereas the third option would plant all the trees on top of what you already have. Therefore, if I click plant trees again when it was on add to map, there'll be twice the amount of trees at the end. So that's these options. I'm happy with the trees. And the trees are models, but the grass is a texture. It's a texture which is planted onto the terrain. So I have a grass texture here, like so. You've got the amount. You've got the healthy colour and the dry colour. The grass, when planted, will vary between these 2 colours. You've got the start and end again, and you have the exact same steepness options as you did before. I'm going to set this to exactly the same as we had for trees. If I click plant grass, like so, and we zoom in, we can see we've got this grass now here. I'm going to up the max steepness a bit. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm quite happy with how that has turned out there. If I change this amount down to 1 and plant the grass again, we can see there's now less grass. Sometimes even if you put this on amount 1 and there's too much grass on your scene, you may have to change this detail resolution to a smaller number. As like for textures in the trees, you can add as many as you want. So I'm going to add 2 different types of grass, like so, and I'm going to plant them. So there we go, we've got two different types of grass there. You've got exactly the same settings as you did for the trees. If you go to the plant paint details section of the terrain, you can see all of your possible grass and objects you could plant. So you can either delete the unused, keep the unused, or add to the map. So that's it for the foliage section. I'm pretty happy with how this looks at the moment. So let's go on to the place objects. You've got the singular object placement, which individually puts an object down wherever you want it to. And you've got the mass object placement, where you put a load of objects down all at one time. So if we select an object, for example this barrel, and move our mouse over the terrain, you can see this red barrel, it's tinted red, follows our mouse. And if we click, it will be placed wherever our mouse was. So you can really quickly place a load of objects in your scene. You have an optional parameter here, which is the parent. So if you put an object which is in your scene already into that, it will create your object, but it will also be a child of that parent object. You've got the Y offset. You can set this to 1 or any number, and it's basically the height of the terrain. So if we place that, you can see it's now 1 unit off the terrain, so it's floating. This looks weird at the moment, but if this was a bigger object, it would be moving out of the ground, for example. Or you could set it to a minus number, minus 0.5 for example, and you can see the barrel is sunk into the ground. You've also got the Y rotation, so this is the rotation around the Y axis, so you can change this and it will rotate that object, like so. So those are the singular object placement options. And now we go on to the mass object placement, which is basically sort of like the tree system, where it puts down a load of objects all at once. So for example, if I select a rock, put the density fairly low, and just you've got the start and end. So the density is exactly the same as it was for the foliage. The start and end is the same as it has been before. And the steepness is now a double slider, so you can specifically select what steepness range you want your objects to be placed in. So let's just say I wanted it placed in any steepness. And maybe I want them to sink into the ground a little, because this Y offset's exactly the same as it was for the singular object. And then if I click construct, we can now see there is a load of rocks scattered around my terrain. So it can really quickly place objects into your scene. This can be really good if, for example, in my case, I have some good cliff models which are really big, like so. So maybe I want this at minus 35 or something. Fairly low density, so maybe I'll have it about there. Only places objects out of the water, and I want the steepness to be something like that. And now if I click construct, occasionally if none of the terrain suits any of these, it won't create an object, in which case you'll have to delete the parent and just try again with some different settings. So maybe that, yep, there we go. So that's created a fair amount of cliff. At the moment it looks a bit ridiculous, but you can just get the parent and sink all this cliff into the terrain. And that looks a bit better. You've got some kind of rocky outcrops here on the sides of the mountains, and you've got some rocks. So that looks okay. And then maybe I will change to another cliff model. Click construct again. And yeah, so you can build up some really rocky terrain that way if you have some nice models like I do. So that looks pretty good for a scene. I am pretty happy with that, and we've covered object placement and the foliage in this video, and we'll be going on to auto fence and path maker in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.